Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's London Java Community event. If you don't know me, my name is Abby. I work with Barry Cranford, who is the founder of the LJC. The LJC is just one of the communities that is run by RecWorks. We are a tech recruitment company with a massive, massive difference. From our perspective, recruitment really can be a force for good in the industry beyond just placing people in jobs, and we have a particular focus on learning, mentoring and personal development. If people want to learn and others want to teach or share their knowledge, we are happy to introduce you through our communities and events. We see this as giving back to those we've worked with in the past, but also paying it forward to those we hope to work with in the future. To date, we have run over 700 events for engineers and developers, students, graduates, CTOs. We have run conferences, lightning talks, hackathons, mingles, all sorts. In January of this year, we made our 4,000th introduction through our Meet a Mentor program. We're really excited about that and looking forward to seeing where it's going to go next. As I've already said, we love to give opportunities to connect people, and this event is part of that. If you would like to know more about any of our other communities, please do get in touch with myself, Helen Lewis or Barry, and we can take it from there. The recording of today's session will be available on YouTube. I will put the link to the channel in the chat later on, or you can message me on LinkedIn and I'll be able to send it over to you. But with no further ado, I'm really excited to introduce Akmal to you, who's here to talk to us about WebAssembly for Java developers. So over to you, Akmal. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Abby. So welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. So I will just briefly show my face here, okay, and then turn off, simply because the slides are more interesting to look at than me. And so if I focus on the presentation, that I think would be a lot better. Okay, there we go. Let me just turn that off. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I do have some slides to show you and a couple of code examples. There is a sort of working demo that I have as well. And I've got some links to some resources. So if you want to try out what I'm going to show you, you're very welcome to do so. And you can do that in your own time. Now, I realize we've got approximately an hour scheduled for this session. However, I will try to ensure that I can finish a little bit earlier than that to give you back some time. And perhaps some of you are giving up your time during your lunch break to attend this, I understand. So let's get moving here. And thank you very much to RecWorks for arranging this through the LJC. Okay, so WebAssembly for Java developers. Actually, we could just say developers. You don't necessarily have to be a Java developer to take advantage of this. And one of the nice things about WebAssembly today is actually multiple languages are supported. And we'll look at a couple of examples today. But I think that the key reason for putting the Java in there is to show you that, yes, you can use it with Java as well, although Single Store currently doesn't support that capability as far as the UDF examples that we're going to look at for the moment. That may be in the works, maybe something for the future. However, one of my observations over the years, and having been in IT for a very long time, is that typically within an organization, it's very rare to find a single platform or a single technology that the entire organization uses, especially if you're a large company. Multiple teams, they'll use different languages, different frameworks, and so on. Even database systems, you can have many different types of database systems that are used within an organization. And that's okay. I mean, that's the nature of development and that's the nature of life. You know, you pick a tool that is appropriate for the job at hand. So it could well be, for example, that you are working with other teams that are using different languages, for example, and you might want to take advantage of some of the libraries and the code that has been developed elsewhere, and that can be done through this concept of WebAssembly. Okay, so we'll look at some simple examples today. All right, now let me go. So a little bit about me then. Broad industry experience. I've been in IT for quite a long time now. And I've worked in a variety of different roles, everything from a developer, where I started life many years ago working for Reuters in London on real-time systems and relational databases, and used to be based in Tabernacle Street, just around the corner from Old Street Station, so not very far from the city. And that was working with a variety of different tools and languages. Interestingly, Pascal was the language of choice for Reuters for a lot of its systems in those days. I'm sure they've moved on since then, but I worked on other things as well. RTL2, process control language, I think originally developed by ICI. And so I got fairly broad sort of skills, subsequently moved into working for a number of vendors over the years, things like Computer Associates, IBM, for example. And I've worked also for a bunch of startups over the last 10 years or so, both small and large. And some of the roles have been client-facing, so I've done consulting work as well, and lots of publications and presentations. So these days, I tend to focus much more on communities, meetups, conferences, writing blog articles, building code examples, and so on. Okay, so I'll just point you to some resources very shortly. And here are some of the examples of publications. Now, a word of caution here, please don't buy any of these books, okay? So maybe it's a bit of an unusual request, but this is kind of history, if you like. I mean, the nature of technology today and my kind of take on this, comparing it to, say, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, things move just too fast today. Books are great. Online books are even better. But the thing is that, you know, publication is a kind of a lengthy process. If you plan to write a book, it's going to take you a couple of years probably to do it. And, you know, by the time it gets onto the shelf, unless you're talking about sort of very, you know, general kind of principles or ideas rather than specific technologies, for example, or specific versions of technologies, then very soon these publications become dated. And that's the nature of life again. So you can see that in terms of my background here, started off in object-oriented databases long time ago in terms of books, and then subsequently went on to a couple of other things. So I think XML was the kind of the last big wave that I worked on. Did a little bit here on Java and databases in the middle too. So the world of database technology has advanced considerably since that time. You know, we've seen the wave of NoSQL databases come around 10 to 15 years ago, and you know, multi-model databases and so on. Okay, so things are sort of moving along at a fairly rapid pace. One observation though that I've had, having, you know, sort of with hindsight and looking back at how things have gone, relational technology has been around for a long time. It often gets how to say, you know, people kind of tend to pick on it, you know, so every new wave of database technology comes around, which tends to happen roughly every 10 years or so. The thing that the vendors will tell you is that, oh, you know, relational is dead. We are going to be the next thing, big thing that is going to happen. You should switch to us because we can solve all your business problems. It doesn't happen. And so, you know, savvy relational vendors, the likes of Microsoft and Oracle, IBM and others, what they tend to do is they adapt their technology to meet the new needs of the day. Okay, so over time, things like objects were supported, XML was supported, and now you have the concept of multi-model databases as well, of which single store is an example. Okay. Okay, so let me just pause there for a moment. Okay, so there's a couple of planned pauses, a couple of unplanned pauses, and so what I wanted to do is just quickly show you some links to some resources. So if you are so interested and inclined, on medium.com, I have a website where I do tend to write and publish from time to time. Let me put this into the chat here, okay, and share that with you. There we go. Okay, so, and the other place that I do tend to publish a fair bit is DZone. So in case you're interested in some of the content that I've published over time. So more recently, I've tended to focus obviously on my current employer, Single Store. So there's a whole bunch of articles that I've published over the last year or so that I've been with them. So everything from JSON support to full text to geospatial time series, and then more latterly looking at some data science and machine learning type of problems. And data science, machine learning type of problems is something we're going to focus on today as well. Okay. Back to our slides. Okay. One thing I will say is, and thank you very much to RecWorks for effectively picking up the challenge of running a Java user group. A very long time ago, I helped to run what I put in the slide there, the old Java user group. So this was something that used to run out of Sun Microsystems offices just around the corner from Monument Tube Station many years ago. And in those days, I think we used to host a meetup roughly once a month, I think sometimes more than that, but typically on a Friday, I think it was. And Sun Microsystems used to very kindly provide all the catering, and it was a sort of wonderful events to go to. JSIG, it used to be called. At one time, this was amongst the top 25 Java user groups in the world, okay, as voted by members. Sadly, over time, the organizers were not able to continue running it, and it kind of, even the website, I think, is available today, but certainly the domain is, but you don't find any content there, which is a shame. And then again, long time ago, there was this event, City on Java, which was held not far from where I used to work for Reuters, which was and many of you may be familiar with if you're working in the city, the old brewery on Chiswell Street. And that was, as you can see, over 20 years ago, 8th October 2001. So a wonderful event looking at, the application of Java and XML and related technologies to, how it could be used for solving sort of practical problems. Okay. All right, then let's move on to the meat of the presentation today. Then, so let's do a little bit of an introduction. Then, so WebAssembly, okay, or Wasm, as it's called. For those of you who work in the Java space, know the concept of sandboxing security, quite a very, it's a useful feature. It is one of the driving forces why lots of interest in Wasm, because it follows that same kind of model. Java, write once, run anywhere. I think that was the vision a long time ago. To some degree, yes, I think there was success. They achieved that. I know there was, it became a joke at one time as to whether you could actually do that. But with Wasm, yes, that can be achieved as well. The other thing is that in process, near native speed's possible. Now, obviously, because it's still running in a sort of virtual environment, you are going to lose some performance. But because it's designed to be much more lightweight, you do get the performance benefits as well. Pardon me. All the major web browsers are supported. So if you focus specifically in that and as something that replaces or augments JavaScript, then that's fine. Okay, you have no problem. All the major web browsers are supported. The particular focus and interest that I want to raise today and draw your attention to is this last thing down here about the ability to effectively create some code using some existing code, in the case of C, C++, or Rust, for example. So we'll look at C and Rust examples very shortly, and be able to write a kind of user-defined function within this code, load it into a database system, and then you can call that using any external language. I have tested it using a variety of different languages. I've even got a very small Java program that I wrote over the last day or two, just to be able to see if it works as expected, and it does. Okay, so although you may well be Java programmers, nevertheless, this concept will work across the board. Okay, so as long as the code is hosted in the database system and can run there, then you have no issues in terms of being able to call it. Embedded SQL, I'm sure you're very familiar with it, whether you use JDBC, ODBC, or something else, you can execute that and take advantage of the UDF within the DBMS. Okay. What was the original goal? Serve as a universal compiler target that can run in a browser. That's where it kind of started life. Does not require garbage collection. Very useful. Okay. with traditional kind of languages, if you worked in things like C, C++, then as you know, you have to do a little bit of memory management there for you. Java kind of helped in terms of having its own garbage collector or garbage collectors to clean up the memory for you. But with Wasm, you get some additional benefits as well. No, type and memory safety as well. It's not necessarily designed to replace JavaScript per se. I mean, it's something that can work alongside JavaScript. And if you want to use it instead of JavaScript, okay, yeah, that's a potential as well. Lots of language support today, and there is an excellent website there, a GitHub repo that actually goes into this in a lot more detail. And again, I've got a planned pause here. Okay, just for a moment, so that I think we can show you this. Let's have a look at this. Okay, so here is that GitHub repo. Okay, and specifically, because we are focusing very much on Java here, let me put that into the chat box for you and share that. If you're interested, you can take a look at this. So there is some support, TEVM, WebAssembly, bytecoder, okay, and so on. So this GitHub repo does a very good summary of the vast majority of languages and the appropriate tools that are available. There you can see, I mean, huge list, even COBOL. There we go. So one interesting fact, and I don't know if this is still true, I think at one time someone mentioned in an article somewhere that there's more lines of COBOL code in the world today than everything else put together. A very verbose language, but we don't see a lot of new development, but certainly lots of old code still exists and still needs to be maintained. Okay, there we go. Back to our slide deck. Okay, so we've done that. All right, so some of the use cases then. So assume then that we can create these UDFs and we can call them using our Java programs or any other language that we want. What are the sorts of problems that we could use these UDFs for? Well, how about extending the capabilities of the database to handle things like fuzzy text matching, for example? Or, you know, pushing some of the application logic from your application code into the DBMS itself, you know, put it into the database engine. Things like converting binary network messages to ASCII text, for example, you know, just off the top of the head. I'm sure you can think of other examples. And then other things as well. I mean, machine learning, as you know, and data science, very popular and hot topics today. ML ops, I was talking to someone just last night about this whole area, you know, it's becoming very, very important because organizations have vast quantities of data. You know, how to get more valuable insights into that data. I think some years ago, there was an article, either it was the Harvard Business Review or I think the MIT Review, said that something like only 1% of the data that organizations have, they tend to actually get any valuable business insights from. So, I mean, that's mind-boggling because there's an enormous amount and quantity of data, therefore, that potentially has lots of interesting information and, you know, insights that we could get from that businesses could take advantage of. So things like machine learning, for example, being able to run algorithms, sentiment analysis, for example, or classification, for example, these could be very useful. And the other thing is that perhaps some of you have come across the term, you know, citizen data scientist, which I think is something that Gartner coined. So lots more developers are becoming savvy in terms of how to use these data science tools. Things are becoming more automated. AutoML is something that's becoming more popular as well. And therefore, there is a need to have the ability to use these tools, get more insights into the data, get more business value out of it. It's a competitive world, you know, and there's deregulation in many industries. Companies need to get an advantage, and therefore, you know, getting more valuable insights into data is a very, very, you know, it's a problem for which there's solutions now. Other things as well, things like matrix or vector operations, you know, doing mathematical operations. Perhaps there are libraries and maybe, you know, in the finance world, I know that many organizations have all sorts of exotic algorithms and things that they've coded up that are used by traders, for example, to get a competitive edge. And code these and put these into a database system to run now. Okay, so very straightforward then. So as far as the DBMS is concerned, then essentially we have some kind of language that we are going to write our code in. We have this sandbox that's within the DBMS environment, and we just can execute that and call that straight away with any type of SQL. Okay, very, very straightforward. And we'll look at how we can manage this very shortly. The one thing I would say is that, you know, WebAssembly, huge interest and huge number of different kind of problem domains, lots of people expressing an interest in many, many different areas. Specifically within the database world, at the moment, apart from Single Store, which is my employer and the examples that we'll look at today, there are a couple of other vendors that are going in the kind of same direction. So perhaps some of you are familiar with ScalarDB, for example, the drop-in replacement for Apache Cassandra and DataStax. So they are also active in this space in terms of providing these kind of capabilities. Okay, and just to be fair and not to keep this entirely vendor focused. All right then. So let's get on and look at a couple of examples then, and how can we actually do this? All right. So if you're interested, I'm going to show you this manually and do it step by step. However, there are some resources that you can use. And let me, again, take a pause here just for a moment so that it's easy for me to copy and paste this for you. So on GitHub, there are some things that you can access. And although I've done this, let me have a look. Has that gone through correctly? Yeah, that looks good. There we go. So, you know, is there an easier way than what I'm going to show you? There is. Okay, so if you use Visual Studio Code, for example, that will give you the opportunity to download and be able to run everything. It won't do absolutely everything for you, but the environment and all of that and the setup will be done. You will need to do a little bit yourselves. That's part of the documentation on the GitHub repos there. So you're very welcome to test this out yourself. If you are a Single Store customer already, I mean, you can have access to this kind of early release. And in terms of the availability of what I'm showing you, as far as GA is concerned, well, soon. Okay, that's when it's coming out. So the couple of examples that you'll find. So how about something like this? You know, simple example, which I'll show you in C and Rust. Okay, so very simple, x to the power of y. How could we implement this in code? How could we load this into a database system as a UDF and then make use of that, call that directly from, say, Java or any other language? That's possible. On the GitHub repo, there's a more complex example as well. Taking a string, for example, splitting it, you know, looking at the first occurrence of some delimiting string and then returning substrings and so on. Okay, so you can break that down, and the result set is going to be somewhat more complex than the simple example that we have. And then to wrap up, what I'll show you is some sentiment analysis. Okay, so we're going to take something called VADER, okay, which we'll get to a little bit later on, and that can provide some insights into, say, you know, emotions, if you like, if I can put it that way, or sentiments. You know, you go to a restaurant, you might want to leave a review. You say, oh yeah, the food was great, awesome, you know, but the service was terrible. You know, how do we kind of analyze these types of things to get valuable insights into that? So we'll look at that very shortly. Okay, so just to pause there for a moment. Okay, I think I've posted the links already. Okay, so how do we get started then? Well, with Wasm then, one of the things that we need to provide and use is this kind of WIT file, if you like. This is interface definition language, IDL. I knew I'd come across this phrase before many, many years ago. Perhaps some of you are old timers. You've worked in the distributed space. You will have come across something called COBRA, Common Object Request Broker Architecture. Use this concept of an IDL as well. Okay, so it is a language that you define that can be used to define certain things for you. Okay, and we'll see how that's used here. But I mean, this is a very general kind of phrase. It isn't unique to this, but it tends to get used very widely. Supported types. So in the examples that we're going to use, we'll do some integers, signed integers, for example, but other things, floating point, character, list, record, variant, and so on. And there's a complete reference there as well if you want to look at this in more detail. So we need to define this WIT file as a starting point. Okay, and here is the kind of 5-step process that we can use. Once we've done that, we create some source code, we compile that to what's called a Wasm file, and then it's the Wasm file and the WIT file that we can load into the database system, and it then has all the information it needs to be able to execute that, and then we can literally just run it, just like we can any other type of user-defined function, and then we can even include it within select statements as well. Very straightforward. So let's have a look at how we could do this with C, for example, and I'll show you the Rust example as well. So the first thing to do, we'll create a WIT file, okay? So here, so we're going to define this thing here. So as you can see, it says that this is a function. We've got a base and we've got an exponent, okay? They are signed 32-bit, and the result is also going to be assigned 32-bit. The next thing to do then is, as part of the SDK and the tool chain that you have, you can simply build your C code here, okay, using this from the command line. It takes the definitions within that power.wit, and you get a power.c, power.h. Okay, so we're specifying here that we've got the target language here. Okay. Within the header file, then we get a prototype, okay, which again, as you can see, looks very similar to what the IDL actually provides us. And then what we need to do is within the C file, we actually have to provide our implementation, which is very straightforward. Here is the sort of C code to be able to do that. Okay, so notice again that this is the same here. Okay, and then we're just providing the additional code here to fill it out effectively, so that if we were to run this, it would take the parameters, return the result to us, and give us the answer that we need. We simply need to build this again, and as part of the SDK and the tool chain that's set up. But for this, we can do this straight away here, and you can see here, this is what we're trying to achieve here. This is what we want as the output, power.wasm, okay? And then finally, that's it. Once that's built, all we need to do is from the database side, then within the DBMS engine, we can create a function, give it a name. Okay, so in this case, we're going to call it the same here, power of. And then we've got some SQL here to provide the location of where to find that. Okay, so this is from local, and also the WIT file itself. And once that's done, essentially that is stored within the database engine. And then all we need to do then is we can call it straight away like this, select power of, just as we can any other type of UDF. It's as simple as that. So you can see the steps are very simple, very straightforward. Now, how about if we were to do this in Rust? Well, we need exactly the same IDL definition, so that hasn't changed. Okay, so the WIT file is exactly the same. Take two signed 32-bit integers, based on the exponent, return a single 32-bit integer as the result. And here with Rust, what we need to do is get the Rust source tree, gives us a sort of skeletal output running this command. Okay. We have to give it a little bit more information then in terms of dependencies, packages, and so on. And in this case, we're going to use this, okay, in terms of the bindgen. Okay, and there is a source directory that's created for us with a lib.rs, as you can see here. And again, we need to provide the actual implementation of the code, right? So it can build a lot of the infrastructure and other things for us, but the code itself, we have to tell it what it is that we want to achieve, and we add this into that file. Okay, once that's done, again, straightforward, we just build. Okay, so the equivalent of the of what you saw with the CLang statement just a couple of slides ago, that gives us the Wasm file. And then the rest of it is identical. Okay, so we just create database, use it, for example, and then we provide the details of the actual function. And again, we have to provide the path to where it can find this. Okay, so this is again loading it from local. Okay, of both the Wasm and the WIT files in order to be able to load that in. Okay, and then the rest is identical. Okay, be able to execute this just as sort of standard SQL. Very straightforward, super easy to use. Okay, we just stop there a moment. Okay, and let me just switch to, bear with me one moment, just switch this further up, go over here. Okay, and you can take a look at some of the code here. Okay, so this is currently, let's have a look. Let's just make that a little bit bigger there. And what I'd like to do is to get into this directory here. Okay, so this is the directory where I've got my C code. Okay, so you can see there that it's created the Wasm file within that same directory. If I have a look at the, I can do cat thing. Okay, here you can see I get the prototype within the header file here, which is automatically generated for me. And within the C code here, as you can see, if you look carefully, you can see I've got this kind of realloc and free in terms of memory. And then further down, we have a look. Here is the actual implementation. So the rest of it's auto-generated for me. This is the bit of code that I need to add here in order to, provide the actual code that does the work, if you like. And the rest of it is all built for me. Okay, so this one is kind of a little bit easier, if you like. Now, if we go and have a look at the, oops, pardon me. Let's just do this. There we go. So the Rust one is a little bit more complex, as we've seen that. So the power.wit file is identical. Let me see if I can make this any more bigger. Okay, let's have a look down here. Okay, so that's the same, no change there. That's the IDL definition. All right. Okay, so here I provided the details of the function that I want, the dependencies, the fact that this is Rust, okay, and so on. And then there are source and target directories. So if I change to source, take a look at the code here. There is my implementation. As you can see, somewhat easier than the C example. So that's just putting in the actual code that's going to do the work for me. And then there's quite a lot that's actually generated underneath in terms of the target, but several directories down, we have the Wasm file that's created for us as well. But other than that, as I said, the tools do a lot of this for us. They generate the scaffolding, all the infrastructure, the plumbing, the rest of it. It's up to us just to provide the little bit of implementation that we need to actually, whatever it is that we're trying to achieve. Okay. So let's have a look at something a little bit more detailed then. Let's have a look at something somewhat more substantial. Okay, sentiment analysis. All right. So we're going to use something called VADER, okay, Valence-Aware Dictionary and Sentiment Reasoner, as it's called. Lexicon and rule-based sentiment analysis to interpret and classify emotions. Kind of difficult to do, I think, just analyzing text. There is a GitHub repo associated with this and implementations in various languages. So even Java has an implementation if you want to go and have a look at this and see how this is actually implemented. The original was done in Python, and that is the repo that I'm referencing just there. Okay, And what it does is that we have this kind of analyzer that takes a string, okay? So we could say, for example, using the example, the food was great, you know, but the restaurant was terrible. And then it provides, you know, returns a dictionary of scores. So, you know, does it sound particularly negative? Is it neutral? You know, neither positive or negative, or does it give a sort of positive stance upon the in terms of the text? And then we get this other thing called compound as well that normalizes the above scores as well. Okay, and let's take a look at that. Okay, so bear with me. Then we'll get back to the summary and wrap up shortly. Okay. All right, so let me minimize this one. And so what I've done is I have just open a new window. Okay. Okay. Oh. Okay, bear with me. Let me just have a look. I think it's in demo. Oops, sorry. All fingers. Yeah, here we are. All right, there we are. And just make this a little bit bigger so you can see what we're doing. Okay, so what we've got here is, take a look at the WIT file. Okay, so here we've provided the interface definition for this. We're saying that we've got, you know, compound, positive, negative, neutral. We've got the actual function, and we need to provide an implementation for the function, okay? And you can see that it's a little bit more complex here in terms of what we're trying to achieve. We go and have a look at the source. Okay, so we are using something that has already been written. Okay, so we don't have to rewrite this ourselves. We can call this. Okay, so this thing, analyzer, sentiment analysis analyzer. Okay, as part of the process, we again provide the details, what we are passing in, what results that we want returned. And this is a great example of reuse. You know, there is a library, someone has written this already. We just take advantage of this. And as part of the build process for this Wasm, we can utilize this. It will create the binary for us. We can just load it into the database using the syntax that I previously showed you. Okay, just create the function, store it in the database, and then once it's in there, we can just call it and use it straight away. Okay, just minimize this a moment. Now, the other thing is that there is nothing to stop you calling the UDF from an external program. So I've got a little bit of Java here, for example, which I've just written. So all it does is it's got some connectivity to the database, which I'm running locally. It's a 2-node cluster, quite small. And I can do things like this, for example, here. Okay, just passing the MySQL connector.jar on the class path, okay, so you can pick up the details there and then just run that. And the string that I'm passing in here, the acting was good, but the movie could have been better. So you can see that, yes, there is a kind of a sense that there is some positivity about that. So, you know, it picks up on the fact that good. But the second part of that, but the movie could have been better, is, you know, there's a kind of a degree of negativity about that. So we could pass this in and it gives us a kind of result on this. So yes, there's a kind of an element of positivity about this. There we go. Not particularly negative, bit of neutral there as well. So, and sort of a compound result there. So across in the database system here, if I take a look at the functions, you can see here that I actually have previously loaded this in. Okay, and it tells me that it is Wasm. I'm using a MySQL client here, and I can just run this from here as well. So again, just a simple select statement to do this. And in this case, for example, the string read the docs, neither positive, negative, just giving me a sort of neutral score on there of 1. What I've got loaded into the database system is about 20 million rows of comments. And we can take a look at some examples here. And just limit it to 5. Okay, let's try 10. Oh, yeah, it's unfortunately because of this. There we go. Let's look at an example here. So we've got, as you can see, there's a sentence here. I want to separate the list into chunks and then calculate the standard deviation 1 by 1. And if I have a look a little bit higher up there, it says, I have accepted the answer. Thank you very much for your help. Okay, so it's quite a mixture of different phrases, different texts there. And what we can do then is one of the easy ways that we can access this, in addition to running it from our client or running it from a Java program, is just simply launch it from, say, Jupyter or something like this. Okay, so I don't have a Jupyter kernel installed here, but this is just using a little bit of Python, for example. So basically, we just set this up, do some connectivity, okay, provide credentials and location for the database system. Okay, and we can take a look at, we've got about 20 million comments there. So I think the full data set is about 80 million. I've loaded in a quarter of that. And again, we can take a look at some of these in a slightly more structured way rather than using the MySQL client there. As you can see, we've got some text here in the middle. Okay. And across this, using some SQL code here, again, you could embed this within a Java program or any other type of language if you want, and you can do fairly complex things here. So we're just trying to produce a score using this sentiment function that we've created and stored, and apply that and look for particular values or ranges of values, you know, and scoring it, seeing how high, how low, if it's particularly negative or particularly positive. And then just run this across the data set there. Okay, just taking a moment or two to run. There we go. And so it gives us some values there down below here, and we've just simply limited this to a few particular values. Okay. And if we want, we could do some graphics, just plot the results here to show this in a slightly more nice sort of visual way. So we get, you know, trying to draw this ordinary least squares, a line through both the positive here you can see and the negative in the purple there, to get a sense of what the overall data is showing us. Okay, so just to summarize, okay, and finish off. Now, one of the things you may have spotted is that I showed the examples for loading the function using infile, which you have to, from the MySQL client, you actually have to authorize it. It's a flag that you have to say, because for security reasons, I think normally it won't allow you to do this, but you just have to say that it's set to on, or you pass it in as a parameter so that you can do that. However, you can host the code somewhere else as well. It could be, for example, you know, an S3 bucket. It could be on Google Cloud or somewhere else. And you just simply need to provide the details of where that is. And you can load that in from the web. Okay, so both the WASM and the WIT files need to be available in order to do this. Okay, so just to summarize then, so WebAssembly, UDFs, lots of power, extensibility. You can extend the capabilities of your database engine. Maybe there are some particular algorithms, some pieces of code that have been developed internally within an organization. Perhaps you would like to make that available more widely, centralize it. You could provide that as part of, standard infrastructure, for example. That code can be executed by the DBMS engine for you. Currently, as far as single store is concerned, support for C, C++, and Rust. Other languages are in the pipeline, but more broadly, if you go and have a look at Wasm in general, you'll see that actually there is very wide support for it already out there. The GitHub repo that I referenced to you earlier has got a huge list of languages and tools that are available if you're interested. Some of those we mentioned for Java. The other thing is that it's got all the nice benefits in terms of running in a virtual environment. Safety, I think, is one of the principal drivers why people want to use it, because of the sandboxing. Performance is as good, nearly as good as native performance, not quite, I think, because you can obviously understand there is some overhead involved there. But certainly for the couple of examples that I've shown you, very straightforward. Now, again, I did this all by hand, manually. So I've installed a local cluster here. I walked through the examples step by step in terms of showing you to, create the WIT file, compile the code, add the actual implementation, and then get it loaded into the database system, and then you can call it as you can any other UDF. The Visual Studio Code project will make that somewhat easier for you, because I think at the moment, unless you're a single store customer, it'd be very difficult to get a hold of the particular build of the DBMS engine. So this provides you with a better way to be able to access that. And as I said, it's going GA soon. Okay, great. So we just finish off there. All right. So the other thing is that if you're interested, lots of resources available on the internet. The Bytecode Alliance is a great place to go to if you want to kind of find out a little bit more in terms of some of the directions that the technology is heading in. W3C is building standards around this as well, which is again great, because it means that we get some confidence that things really are going to work across the board, that it's going to be portable, it's going to be well supported. Those are kind of important, I think, with these type of technologies. Okay, well, thank you very much. So we've got a little bit of time for some questions. So Abby, are there any particular questions that we have in the chat?
I've had one question in the chat. I don't know if you want to unmute and ask yourself, or did you want me to ask?
Hi there. Is my microphone working? Yes, it is. Okay, good. Hi, Akmal. Thanks very much for your talk. It's really interesting. I have had sort of flashbacks 20 years to trying to load Java functions into an Infomix database and similar things. So yeah, it's interesting to see this sort of stuff come back again.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
So these days, of course, I'm a Java dev. I've got a standard set of tooling involving Gradle and Flyway and other fairly common tools, which I think people on the talk are probably familiar with. What I'm struggling to get my head around is how I would integrate this sort of technology into a tooling set and a build system like that. I'm sort of thinking, okay, I need a Gradle plugin that'll compile the Wasm, and then I need some way of using Flyway to pull that into the database. And I don't know, maybe it's been done and you know about it. I just wanted to ask and see if you'd encountered that sort of thing.
That's a great question. Thank you very much for that. Off the top of my head, what you've asked is a very pertinent question, because you're speaking with your developer's hat on, and you do this on a day-to-day basis. I'm kind of just telling you that this is great and use it. So you're asking me, well, look, I've got a problem here. Let me look into that for you, okay? Because I think that's a great question and worthy of a more detailed answer. And perhaps even worthy of a blog post, because I think what you've touched upon is an important issue. With a lot of these technologies that seem to emerge, it's great from the sense of just understanding that the capabilities are, but when you want to incorporate these into the actual development process, sometimes it's not so straightforward as you've rightly identified. So I will take that as an action, and I will go away and find the answer for you. Feel free to reach out to me. Okay, so it's very simple. It's just my name often gets badly misspelled simply because there's about 20 different ways I think my surname is spelled, but it's just A Chaudhri, one word, at singlestore.com. So just drop me an email, please, okay? And I will chase that up for you and I will find an answer. Thank you very much for that great question, though. And your observation, absolutely right. So I used to work for Infomix long time ago, and I had the privilege to work for Mike Stonebreaker as well. So Mike was a legend in the database world. And, you know, he had some awesome ideas in terms of extensibility. So this idea of data blades, for example, was very popular a long time ago, that you could build these libraries, extend the core capabilities of the engine, for example, and you have these executing in a different space as well. Or you give up the safety and have them execute in the same space as the DBMS engine, but then there's no guarantee, because if there's an error or a problem or a fault, the whole system comes crashing down. So, and then other thing someone mentioned to me recently was ActiveX, as something else that, you know, might be something that we came across trying to do some similar things not that long ago. But I think where this is going to be successful is that it's got very broad industry support. Originally, yes, it was designed for one particular type of problem and sort of use case, if you like, very much focused around the web, but hence the name WebAssembly. But subsequently, the applications for this have just mushroomed. People can see all sorts of places where this type of thing can be very useful. It just so happens that SingleStore is one of a handful of vendors that's seen there's an advantage to being able to offer this kind of capability for, as far as, you know, extending what a database engine can do, or being able to use some of the existing code libraries that we may have lying around, and you know, how can we utilize these more effectively, and how can we run these within the DBMS and take the advantage of the DBMS. So you're absolutely right. I mean, it swings and roundabouts. Things tend to come around, you know, and that's life. Technology sometimes does that.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So thanks for the talk. So I'm interested in using Java to call a library that's been written in Go. So the Go library has already had the IDL added to it, so it's all available via Wasm.
Yes.
And I want to call it from Java.
Yeah.
And I've looked at a lot of like the open source things that are out there now that claim to be able to do that, and a lot of them seem like abandoned or very immature. So I don't know if you've got any recommendations, like what's the best way to do that? Is there a particular library or Java Wasm thing that's good at doing this?
Again, great question. I think the only, I mean, what I would say, have a look at this place. This is awesome, this place here. There are some references to Java sort of specific tools here. So, you know, Java.
So the problem with all of those is they do the opposite. So they expose Java as well.
Gotcha.
I want to do it the other way around.
Okay, so what we want is sort of the Go information. Again, leave that with me. Drop me an email, okay? And I can chase that up for you and find some more information about that. My feeling is, from the SingleStore side of things, Go support is coming at some point. So at the moment, the languages that are supported are limited to C, C++, and Rust, but there is other stuff that's in the pipeline, and potentially, you know, Go would be a very attractive one to do as well. So
SingleStore's not written in Java, right? So you're doing it from C++ or something else, right?
For the actual code, yes. I mean, the examples I showed is C, C++, and Rust, and then just generating the Wasm, and then just storing the Wasm as a function inside the SingleStore engine at the moment. Those are the languages that are supported. More in the pipeline, as I say, but I have no idea in terms of availability. So Go, I think, is an obvious one to do. I think Python would be another one, simply because of its popularity and the fact that, as I mentioned, machine learning and data science seems to be a very important space for a lot of companies. So taking some existing machine learning code, for example, that you may have written in sort of Python might be a good choice as well. But for the Go, I can chase that up for you, and I can make some inquiries for you. Yeah, thank you again for the great question.
Fantastic. Any other questions?
Yeah, that's great. So again, Abby, just point out that, you know, again, if anyone would like to reach me, just please reach out. So it's just A Chaudhri. Please spell Chaudhri correctly. Like I said, there's numerous ways to do it, with a Y, with a W, without an H. So if you get that right, at singlestore.com, just drop me an email, okay? So if there's something specific you're interested in, even not related to single store per se, but more in terms of WASM and so on, let me know, okay? And I'll be very happy to follow that up with you and ask some of my colleagues at single store. So one of my colleagues, Bailey, for example, she is her super skill is in WASM, if you like, if I can put it that way. I mean, she's very active in the Bytecode Alliance, does keynote speeches on this all the time. So she would be someone that I can pick her brain and find some answers.
Fantastic. And I have just put a link in the chat as well. If any of you would like the recording from today's session, you can get it through our YouTube channel or message me on LinkedIn and I'll be able to send it to you when it's available. So all that's left for me to say is thank you so much, Akmal, for coming and sharing what you know. That was really interesting and fascinating as well. And thank you everybody else for joining us. It's been great to see you today, and we hope to see you at our next London Java community event. Have a great afternoon. Enjoy. Take care.